So I just want to say I really enjoyed the previous presentation. He spoke to a lot of the points that we're going to be talking about in our presentations around lessons learned from the pandemic and stuff. I think it's really important to recognize that this pandemic has really shown a spotlight on for Canadians in general around some of those issues that we've been dealing with for a very long time in First Nations communities, namely, and that's attendance, how do we measure students' progress, how do we get individuals to perform at their peak ability, and how do we create this understanding that education is important on a daily basis for our students. I think this pandemic, what we've learned through this pandemic in our community of Membertou is the importance of planning and that whole planning cycle and how it plays into and how it's important that we understand it. In our language, so many of our words, our concepts for that are all verb based. So when we talk about the plan, we're really talking about planning. When we talk about preparation, we're talking about preparing. And when we talk about implementation, we're talking about implementing. And when we talk about an evaluation, we're talking about evaluation. We talk about these as processes that go on and on and on in our community. So the first thing I want to say is that the pandemic really created for us an opportunity to look at how we do things. One of our biggest challenges initially, and the first thing that came up for our community was we spent the last 20 years really building an attendance model in our school system, one that focuses on getting kids to school every day, making sure that they're prepared when they come, making sure that they're participating when they come, making sure that they're learning when they're in front of us. And so with the pandemic, one of our challenges was they were not going to be directly in front of us every day. And we built a system here that's based on school attendance as the first priority. And we wanted to, it was one of our reclaimed cultural values. We know that the residential school experience did a lot of things. It took away identity, language, pride, but it also corrupted some core values we as a First Nations had. And one of them was around attending. And you know, we were always a people who attended to the things that we needed to do. And the residential school experience made education as a concept, a negative concept when it never was. And so we came up with a plan in our community to take that value around attendance and really reclaim it as our own and bring it back into the forefront and make school a safe place. Make sure that the attendance and the education of children started from a place of attendance, from a place of, in our language, the word is degodement. And it's a verb meaning to attend or attending. So it became very important to us. We know that throughout the pandemic, the first thing that happened for us was our students were no longer in school; they were at home. And when we first entered in March of 2019, it seems such a long time ago, or in March of 2020, and a year and a half ago. The first thing for us that happened was our students were no longer in front of our teachers, and we had to address that as a reality. Fortunately for us, we've had a lot of experience in teaching in a technology environment. And I come from a community that has a high degree of technology. And so we already had our students online. We already had our students set up in different types of Seesaw classrooms and Google classrooms and for different classwork and working with other schools across the country. So our first challenge was, how do we set up our system that way? So we went and you know, we started school a week after it was closed down online, about a month before the local provincial school here had gotten kids back together and into a learning environment. And it became important for us to understand that first challenge of, we're going to be teaching children. They're going to be teaching them remotely. They're still in front of us. They're just virtually in front of us. And we still had to take attendance. We still had to impress upon parents the importance of having their children be present in that environment, because we're going to be doing these things. The other thing that was difficult was our word for attaining is gizadudo. It means, basically, it means what do you need to be doing? What needs to be done? What's important? And it raised the question during the pandemic of how can we ensure that all of our students succeed? What do they need to be doing every day? What skills do they need to be getting out of this online virtual world, this virtual type of education that we're providing? So it forced us to really sit back and say, what is the most important things we want to be teaching our children? And then the other thing was, how do we get children to learn on an individual basis? How do we get them to be the most successful version of themselves in the classroom when it's virtual, when there's no teacher there giving immediate feedback and things like that? So in our language, achievement, that personal level achievement is bizigizadigem. How are you doing? What are you doing the best way you can do? And so it became important that the teachers understood. They understood, how do we evaluate this? How do we recognize achievement on students when they're not there in front of us every day? So that became important. The last thing that we talked about is elmuptigim. And that means, how do we get children to aspire to be something in a time when how do we get them to aspire to be the best versions of themselves? How do we get them to understand that they want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a physicist or a fireman or a police officer when they're not in the school and we don't have an opportunity to talk to them every day? So those were some of the challenges that we had in our system. And then the last thing that's important in our system is who we are as Mi'kmaq. What does it mean to be Ulnu? What does it mean to be Mi'kmaq? And so that Aboriginal identity piece that became such an important part of our school program, how do you teach that through a virtual environment? And so we started out, and we had our teachers going on every day. They were doing the work every day for language, literacy, numeracy, and most importantly, they were having their Mi'kmaq language classes online every day. And so they had some virtual campfires, to use an earlier reference from the previous speaker. And so we were trying to light those fires and keep the students engaged. And then when we came back in September, and we were coming back into an environment where students are going to be present every single day, but we don't know how long. We don't know how long it's going to last. So for us, that planning part became so important. We had to make sure we had enough devices for every student. We had to make sure that every parent and every home had access to the internet. For those that didn't, we had to set up sites in our community so they could go and access the internet to get information for their students and to do that. And so the preparation part became important. So our cycles became planning, preparation, preparing, implementing, and then evaluating. And so those became the core learnings for us. And what we realized was that that's really the essence of Mi'kmaq life anyway. It's the essence of who we are as a people, this planning process, this preparing process. We're in a state of preparing for the future all of the time. We're in a state of planning for the future in all of the time. We're in a state of implementing the things that we have to do, because as a people, a survivalist people, it was important to do all of these things. And the evaluation is just part of our worldview. We talk about in our territory, Nadugalim being the most important concept in our relationship to the natural world, and how we fit into it, and how we take care of it, and how we do that. That's really a process of evaluation, continuous improvement. And so those were some of the things that we realized about that the pandemic was, our education system is very much responsive to a Mi'kmaq model. It's very much responsive, and in order to be successful in the pandemic, we needed to go back to those things. We need to be responsive. We need to be constantly evaluating. We need to be constantly planning, and we need to be constantly preparing and implementing new ideas on a regular basis. So when we talk about resilience, I think that First Nations communities were so well positioned, not always well prepared, but we were well positioned to welcome the challenges that the pandemic brought to us. And it allowed us, I think, in so many ways to become leaders, at least in this area, around how we can provide an education when the traditional four walls in a classroom model breaks down. The westernized concept of education that you learn in an environment, an enclosed environment, in a very structured environment. When that went away for a brief period of time, we realized there's a richness in terms of education, and we can grab onto it. And I think that's one of the things that we've done well in our area, even to the point now we're back in school on a regular basis, but our teachers are asking for more field trips, they're asking for more opportunity to engage in different environments for learning. So I think that's been one of our greatest lessons, and certainly shows the resilience, not just of our people, but of our systems as well. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about.